Howdy, CvCISO podcast listeners. Welcome to episode 29 of the podcast. Meg is here, Jordan is here, and I'm Evan, the weird one. But tonight, it could be tonight, I guess it depends what part of the world you're in. Meg, this is your topic. So tell us what we're going to do.
Yes. Well, in honor of Halloween, so we've got the holiday Halloween coming up here soon.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we'd talk about something scary.
Whoa.
So the title of the podcast is Keeping It Real, the Scary Side of Being a vCISO.
We need under to strike right when you say that.
Yeah, like
You know what's really scary? My feet.
How
Don't
they
show
look
them
or
to
how
us.
they smell.
Yes.
Don't show them to us. We do not want to see your feet.
So that's the scary side of this VC.
For Halloween, I'm going to be one of Evan's feet.
Oh, you're going to scare all the kids.
Man,
They might arrest you actually for that
Kids coming to the door, and I'm a big foot.
yeah,
Bigfoot.
there you go.
Evan, have you done a pedicure before?
Yes, I like them a lot. Mm-hmm. Look, I have a Carl's Jr. cup. There's a Carl's Jr. here. 2 of them, 3 of them.
What
here
is
in
it?
Mexico.
I don't even
Water.
know what that is.
Carl's Jr.?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Meg.
Shouldn't it be Carlos? Carlos?
Meg,
Senor?
we can open your world for
Right.
you. We can just, it's awesome to be your friend because it's like I can provide value in these things.
By showing me a Carl's Jr.? Is
Yes,
it a burger
ma'am.
place?
Well, yes,
It's like Hardee's, right?
but
It
a
is
little
Hardee's,
bit better.
isn't it? Like
Yeah,
Hardee's?
same people, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Carl's
All
Jr.
right.
is a burger place like a Hardee's on, a prettier Hardee's.
Nice big juicy burgers.
That's right. When you eat too
Man, the
many of them,
Hardee's?
it also gets scary because then I get a scary belly. I have a scary.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
see that.
Let's see that. All
I
right.
forgot. You have no inhibitions.
Jordan, like, really?
Yeah.
Like,
What else
would
can we make them do?
Yeah, I can do lots of really cool things.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right. So the first thing that's
It's getting
scary
serious
about
now.
being a vCISO, that you have limited control but high accountability.
That can be scary. For sure. I mean, I don't know. Some people, I wonder how many people who are vCISOs who don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, and they just about like trying, you get this comfort thing. And so you get hired by the customer. And as long as you're not causing too many ripples, you're not causing too much noise, and you haven't had a breach, and you can demonstrate that you've done some things, that it justifies your pay, just kind of fly under the radar. I wonder how many people do that.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, then you're not scared for the customer. But if you do that, then maybe that's how you avoid this scary thing of being accountable
High
but not
accountability.
empowered.
See, I think that, I don't know, maybe it's because my whole career hasn't been like CISO and stuff like that. A lot of how I approach this, I've learned through Evan and the community and the course and stuff. Like, I have found it very empowering. And I think that, like, to communicate. So I think one way that I would maybe address this fear would be educating from the beginning, making it clear. I love talking to my clients nowadays and saying, and giving them the keys. Like, you make the decisions. I will give you my best consultation on the risk, but you're driving the car, you're accountable, and preparing them for, if breaches happen, like we all know, like all of us talk about this, assume breach. Like, what are you going to do next? Like, we can only put so much stuff in place to try to protect you from ever having a breach or having some sort of an incident. So let's get to the incident response part of it and prepare for it. And I think if you're educating them enough, it might take a long time. What did some people say? It's like it takes 7 times to hear something once. So it might
Yeah.
take a lot of that, but I think educating, being very clear always, I'm not the one accountable, you are. I consult you.
Yeah. And do you find, have you had customers that wasn't good enough, that we say we consult the business to make risk decisions, we empower them to do that, and then we implement those risk decisions. Have you found customers that want you to just do it, you own it? 'Cause that's
Yes.
frustrating.
Yes. I mean, I just had a QBR yesterday with the client, and we brought up that there is a policy that they have, and they said they list the role of this thing, and it said top dog. And I said, you put our name there, but we didn't talk about this. We don't know what that even means, And so, yeah, I mean, I feel very good having those conversations, bringing those things up, because you're right. They do mistakenly, maybe it's out of laziness, maybe it's out of just a lack of education of what, how this actually works. But I don't hear a whole lot of pushback from that. I mean, they sometimes say, yeah, but we do need you. Like, we do need you. And I said, yeah. I mean, we're happy to be a part of this, but we have to know exactly what it is. Because if you just think we're going to magically make everything without being on the same page, like, we don't, that I think it's,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times that maybe comes out of ignorance, because I found the same thing that you have. Like, they want just you to they hire you, and they just want you to make it go away. Like, just take care of it. And when you explain to them, you take the time to explain to them that I can't make it go away. I've had not lots, but numerous times I've had CEOs tell me, I just want you to keep me out of the news. And I tell them, I can't keep you out of the news. That's not, but what I can do is, if we work together well and we understand our roles and responsibilities, I can make sure you have a really good story for when you are in the news, but I can't keep you out of it. And that's the thing about a lot of this industry, is just who does what. I mean, who's responsible for what? So I think you can combat this fear of being held accountable but not empowered by clearly defining these roles and responsibilities. Because if you did want me to make the risk decisions for you, then give me your checkbook.
Yeah.
You won't do that because it's not my responsibility. You have to make those decisions, right?
I've always wondered, in class, we talk about that the vCISO's role is to consult, and that we're not necessarily the decision makers. We're just consulting and implementing. I've always wondered how often they expect you to be the decision maker.
Well, and you can. I mean, you can do that. You just need to be clear on what the delegation is, where the lines are drawn. I'll make decisions, but to what point? And sometimes you have to feel it out too. You don't know. Because the truth is, as a CISO or a vCISO, you are making risk decisions, but it's not really you're speaking on behalf of the business. The business has delegated these things to you, and it's clear. Because that can sometimes, I can see that getting scary, where it's not well defined, and I make the decision and it goes to crap, and then everybody's like, what did you do? I'm like, well,
right. I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Roles. That's why governance, I think, as early in the game as you can, get that stuff implemented so everybody's clear on who's doing what. And then as a vCISO and as a CISO, and as really anything you do in this industry, be prepared to cover your ass. That's why I don't like documentation any more than anybody else, but I like what it brings when shit hits the fan and people ask me why I did what I did, or having that documentation is really important.
Yeah.
I do think we can be, if we're realistic about it, like there are some things that we are accountable for. But, maybe maybe you gave a poor recommendation, like that would be a fair thing to be like, hey, you told me this, and
and that's why I love the road mapping process, because in the road mapping process, it's explicit what I'm being held accountable for. I have to get these things done within this time frame, and as does all the other people that are involved in the security program. Road mapping is critical to this equation.
Yeah. Yep.
What else is scary besides my
All right,
feet,
number
my
number
belly,
2.
and
Another
my feet?
scary thing about this vCISO work, constantly shifting threat landscape. And maybe what I liked about what just organically happened with the last one is we really kind of shifted into how maybe it's not so scary. So I like that. But
Yeah.
this
I
is
think
scary.
the things that, I mean, when you think about like life, what's the things that scare you the most? Usually it's the things you don't understand. If you understand, what's actually going on. I mean, obviously there's mental things too. There's phobias that are probably unhealthy, but the better you understand your situation, the better you understand your environment, the better you understand what it is you're trying to protect, the better you understand the threats that are coming at you, the less fear you have. So I think a lot of that fear is probably driven by just lack of knowledge, ignorance maybe, or an unrealistic fear. We see that a lot in incident response. People freak out, oh my God. And it's, you're not going to die, probably. I don't know. If you did, just get right with Jesus first.
Well, and if you're doing the work, right? Aren't you aware of this constantly shifting landscape and responding accordingly? To me, it's only scary if you're just not doing anything about that.
Well, and that's the thing. If you really understood it, you would understand that the threat landscape, meaning like the world, yeah, that's constantly changing. Your threat landscape, not changing very much at all.
That's kind of where my mind was going with it too, because I think that I kept thinking like, yeah, you can't. The threat landscape is going to be what it is. The world is going to change. New things are going to come, and there's exciting things about that too. But also, like we talk all the time about just doing the fundamentals. So the way you approach it probably won't change a ton. Maybe there's new tools or whatever, but you're still doing risk assessment, figuring out what it is, where you're at, what you're missing, getting good with the basics, and
Vulnerability scans.
yeah. So all that chaos around you, yeah. I mean, it might be tough to stay on top of it. That's something. But how you just approach the day-to-day things, like you said,
That's
it's
great.
not.
That's great. That's great advice. And truly, that's expert advice, in my opinion, because don't lose focus of that. It's so easy to get distracted, especially for somebody like me being an ADHD guy and all that. I don't need help getting distracted. I can do it myself. But we're constantly bombarded with emails from vendors. We're constantly bombarded by news of this ransomware attack, this thing, and we like to use these big words. I just read yesterday how was making the case that legacy multi-factor authentication is no longer adequate. I was like, what do you mean? So I read this article and it was OTP. So that's one-time passwords, right? And SMS based. That would be the text-based, second factor. Those are no longer adequate, that you need to use this. And yet, as you continue to read, they went into phishing resistant and next generation multi-factor. And I was like, my God. So if you read this stuff and you can't put things in the context, it will get scary. It absolutely. And that's why they say, they use fear, uncertainty, and doubt to sell you. So I think the way you combat that is understand context, understand the situation. When you realize where you fit, where your company fits, or your customer fits in this grand scheme of things, it's not nearly as scary as you thought it was. Minimize your attack surface. Most of the attackers, if you're working in the private sector, small to mid-sized business, your threats are money-motivated threats for the most part, right? You're not going to get nation-state stuff. And even then, it's usually lack of knowledge where people freak out and they get really scared. Because even in a nation-state attack, that people get freaked out. Oh my God, nation-state, like Iran's attacking me. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's the same TCP/IP that I use and you use. The attacks are the same. There's no magic. There's no pixie dust. The threat is similar to a lot of the other ones. They just have more capabilities, more resources behind it. But that's the way you overcome the constantly evolving threat landscape is understand yourself, understand your threat landscape. You're not going to do shit about the world's threat landscape. So why even concern yourself with it?
Yeah.
It just gets distracting, and it can cause fear.
And I know it can get exhausting when you're thinking about, it from the standpoint of things are changing so fast. How do you stay up to speed on things? You're supposed to be the expert, and that can be exhausting to try to be an expert at everything. And that again goes back to why community is great, because you're not going to be the expert at everything. And there might be people that have this huge passion to just dive into all the new AI stuff or the next new thing, and surrounding yourself with people that can help you is, it's the only way. I mean, if you try to do it all yourself, of course it's going to be scary and overwhelming and exhausting.
Yeah, I see a lot of people get scared of that. They get scared of not knowing, scared of not being, not knowing everything. And yeah, I think the constant in the community and building each other up, the constant reassurance that nobody knows everything. There are many times, almost for sure weekly, maybe daily, where we're talking about something I don't know shit about.
Yeah. I think
the
why
only
it's
time,
important.
Yeah, sorry, Meg, go ahead.
Well, I think that's why it's important to collaborate, and that's what the community brings. I'm a huge collaborator, and a lot of that is my mechanism to deal with anxiety. And so, if you can put things in place that help you where you don't feel so on an island or alone.
And don't try to be something you're not. But then it can get really scary because you're kind of doubling down. If you don't know it, it's okay. Admit it. And if you feel like you need to defend that you don't know it or you don't know everything, because the truth is you shouldn't even have to defend it. Nobody does, right? But if you feel like you do and you need to justify it, it's a great education opportunity for whoever your audience is. And use some examples. These are the things that I am really good at. I'm really good at these 5 things, and I'm not an expert. I don't like to call myself an expert in anything. But, these other, because that gets intimidating for people too. I was talking to, you talk to a lot of new people that want to get into this industry, and they think, I could never do that. I'm like, why couldn't you do that? Well, because, it's too technical. Well, honestly, like the biggest need is not technical. The biggest need is like people.
Yeah.
I suck at the people thing. I'm good at the technical thing. So why don't you come join up and tackle this? But use those as education moments and try to take the focus off of yourself and get comfortable with who you are.
Yeah. All right. How about this one? The constant need to feel like you have to justify your value. That's kind of scary.
Constant
It's like
need.
being on the hot seat. So pressure to justify value continuously.
My first thought is maybe not the full answer, but what's wrong with that? I mean, if you're getting stressed out about it, sure. But I think some of the greatest vCISOs would be asking themselves, what value am I bringing to the table now? Like, how am I going to prove my value every single day of every single, every minute of every single day? And, and I think with that, maybe the grace you need to include in that is that some days you're not going to have your 100%. Some days you didn't bring the value you were hoping to bring, and maybe there's grace and ways to deal with that. But I love when Evan talks about, his approach on that too, with like, if I'm not being valuable, like, don't pay me money if I'm not adding value. Like, that's an inspiring thing and a way to be. So I think what's scary about that, first of all?
Yeah, I think I like that mentality because I feel like I always need to justify that. And I ask a lot of times, like, why are you paying me? And then they realize, okay, well, it's valuable to you. Okay, then, I get it. That makes sense. That because at the end of the day, people pay what the market bears, right? And so for what's valuable, I think every vCISO and not even in vCISO, every job, no matter what you do, you should be questioning that. You should be constantly asking yourself, why am I here? Am I providing value? That's why it's so important for us to understand the mission of the business or the organization we're serving. It's really important for us to understand the executive leadership even if you don't get a chance to interface with those people, do some research and try to figure out how you're aligned with that, because that's going to really justify, or that's going to be their perception of value. But I want CEOs, I want boards of directors to ask me on a regular basis how I'm providing value, because it's an opportunity for me to show it.
And I think you should build that into your vCISO practice. I mean, show them what you're doing. If you just think that they're going to, as soon as they, sign the proposal for you to be the vCISO, their vCISO, if you think they're just going to, without any kind of ongoing proof or, communication and documentation, they're just going to always think you're worth the money they're paying you. No, people start to not know. They see the bill. If they're not seeing what you're doing, like, build that into it. You got to constantly remind them, here's what we did last month. Here's what you said,
Yeah, I like
that's counterculture too, because you can do that with everything that you see in the business. And then you really start to emerge as a valuable leader, because you're pointing out other areas where there are things that aren't providing value, right? It's a big deal. Sorry, Meg, I walked on you again.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, I like what you said, because to me, it's kind of like the accountability piece. If you're doing, then you are showing value. If you're making progress, you're showing value. And
if you're doing the right work.
If you're doing the right work.
That's the challenge. And I think that's the big value is, are we doing the right things? Because if we're doing a whole bunch of the not right things, then probably causing more damage than good. So when you can demonstrate the right things and undo the wrong things, you're a big part of the team, I think.
Yeah. Now,
so
this one,
some of that might be, reminding them the why, so you're saying, here, we implemented this just to remind you, here's why we did that,
Okay, so this scary thought may not be, people might have overcome this scary thought, because I think it's just the world that people in IT live in. But the thought is that you're always on call.
No,
it always means always.
And off your phone. No longer on call.
Right.
I mean, is that true? I think there's truth to that, right? Like, you're the one they're going to call if something goes on. Doesn't matter if it's Monday at 1:00 or Friday at 10.
If you've consulted well, now this would be back to the roles and responsibilities thing. If I am on call, well, then it's not scary that I am on call, because I expect it. But if it's, and there'll be times when shit hits the fan and you're going to get called anyway, but that's just life, So I think if you can put it into perspective, it's not as big a deal. I like to use that story of that healthcare organization that it was like Friday, like, I don't know what time it was. I was sleeping. And I woke up in the morning and I had like 20 missed calls, right? And a whole bunch of voicemails. And so I, listen, and it's this big healthcare organization, and they had a breach. And, so I call them back, and they're like, where were you? We were trying to call you. And I hadn't worked for this healthcare organization for a while. So I just, and it might have been, it sounds a lot more dickish than it really was. But I said, grab your incident response plan. Where in that plan does it say to call me? And I'm just pointing that out, that I'm not on call. I was not expected to be on call. You expecting me to be on call was a problem. And it also points out how if you just followed the damn plan, and I get it, people get emotional when shit hits the fan, but that's the time when you really want to use your head, get logical. If you would have followed the plan, I wouldn't even have known about this. So I think pointing that out sometimes, roles and responsibilities is really important.
There are some people that kind of do that to themselves too. I think maybe they want the control. they'll give their cell phone number to everyone, and they just kind of, maybe they're nervous. So like, if something happens, I want to be the first to know, but I think over time, that's not sustainable. So you have to do things. I have some special clients that have my cell phone number, and they, but I have to constantly reinforce when and how to use it. Like, it's not meant to be, and if I'm talking from like the MSP side, It's like if they're texting me, my computer is running slow, I'm going to immediately say, I'm not your guy. Did you submit a help desk ticket? Because that's the fastest way you're going to get help. I'm not the help desk guy. Now, if you have an emergency and you need me to do what I'm supposed to do, that's different. But so it's all clarity. Is everything that you said, Evan? 100%. It's understanding and educating them on the roles. If you want to be available for on-call stuff, fine. Make sure they understand how and when that is, and you understand that.
Comes with the consultation thing. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of CISOs and vCISOs who like play the role of Superman. They want to be the hero. Usually those are the ones I think that probably haven't done it before, because it's not glamorous work and it's not cool to be the hero. Sometimes it really sucks because you have to tell somebody that, they're going to lose their job, or the business isn't even going to survive this. I mean, that's happened before. So yeah, I like what you said, Jordan. As a vCISO, a lot of the times it's my job to get out of the way. Who's the right person? Who's the best person to do that incident response and lead that incident response? If it's me, then fine. It'll be known. We'll document that. Everybody will know that I am the guy to call. If it's not me, well, then find somebody else. Make sure everybody knows.
Well, you're right. I think that that superhero mentality, I think, especially if you are in this, I mean, there's a lot of folks, especially I see it with like technicians, that you're just used to it. Like it's maybe just built in your DNA to like, well, you got a problem, I'm here to solve it. I'll get in there and do it. And there's maybe even some like, release, what is the like dopamine hit or whatever when you help someone, with a problem, and so sometimes I think people do it to themselves almost because they love that feeling of being the superhero. I think that was a good way to put it. And maybe they just don't even know how to stop that. If you got a problem, I'll solve it.
Yeah. Well, and then going back to the value, you're probably a vCISO that's not providing value, maybe causing more damage. Because if you're not the right person to do that role, don't do that role.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of, I think, self-reflection and a lot of honesty.
Make that discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another scary thought about vCISO work is that breaches are inevitable. And I just think of, preparation. I think we talk about that a lot, that, you've got to be prepared because it's only a matter of time if it hasn't happened already. So planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, but again, put it in perspective. Like there are some cases where an incident, a breach can be catastrophic, to the business. There are times when it's really not a big deal. So I think, and the more you understand the environment, the situation, going back to the threat piece, the constantly evolving threat landscape, the less fear you have of these things. And look at life, right? Death is inevitable. But I don't sit around freaking out and being scared about death. It's going to happen. So you do try to prepare. You try, what would be my contingency plan? And so my advice for a CISO or a vCISO who has this fear, it's think of things in your life that have been really painful, whether it was, a natural disaster, hurricane hit your house, a tornado hit your house, whatever. Try to think of something like that and walk through it mentally, because it's going to be somewhat similar when you have an incident. You try to take those lessons and apply them. One of the things that never, ever, ever actually leads, I was talking to a friend of mine, then what leads to most deaths like people dying during natural disasters, lots of things, scuba diving, it's panic. That's what kills you. Knowing that going in, try not to freak out, I guess. And if you can't get yourself around that, if you can't handle it, then again, like we said in the last one, just get out of the way. Have somebody else handle that for you. Somebody's more equipped.
What's really scary about that is I don't think you know how you're going to behave in a situation like that until it actually happens. Like you can think, oh, I'm not going to panic. I can remain calm. I can do this, or, I'll be this way. But until you're actually in the moment and it's actually happening to you, I mean, that's when you find out whether or not you'll be the one that panics. Because I've always thought, I was in a flood once, camping. So my husband and I took a whole bunch of people rock climbing, and they paid us to do that. So we had a huge tent for all the people that were climbing, and then Jim and I were in like a 2-man, 4-season backpacking tent. And all of a sudden, middle of the night, I thought we were under a water tower, and the water tower had just broke because water was like flooding through the tent. And I was like, Jim, what is, and Jim was just calm, cool. Here's the next step. Here's the next step. And I was just like, we got to get out of here. We got to, I couldn't remain calm in that situation. So I don't think you really know
Well,
how you're going to respond.
And that's true. I mean, some people can't remain calm, and you need somebody who can remain calm to help the person who can't remain calm get calm again. Because you do see in incident responses where people won't get out of the way, that are led by people that they can't help but emotion overcoming logic in a lot of the decisions that they're making. And the incident response always just goes to shit. So I think, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of honesty with yourself. Am I a person that works well under pressure or not? And it's okay. It's nothing wrong with either way, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing deficient in you if you're a person who can't keep the emotions, in check very well during an incident. But, find somebody who can. Because I have a lot of friends that are like that too. And I always, not always, but I've been blamed a lot for not caring during an incident. And like, why would you think I don't care? Well, because you're not panicking. I'm like, oh, well, would that help? But perspective really helps a lot in that for me, because you just think like, okay, worst case, what's the worst case here? Like, let's say I totally screwed this up. It's like the worst. I did so bad. Nobody's going to die, probably. Right? I mean, depending on the incident, depending on what you're dealing with. And I always look for opportunities that I can use to take advantage of this, because you do have an early head start. Not early head start. I guess you have an opportunity to control the narrative on an incident, on a data breach, but you gotta think. You're not going to do that if you're going with emotion. But yeah, if you're afraid of that, and it's okay to be afraid. Shit. Just be afraid. And, and if you want to not be afraid, well, then don't do it anymore.
I mean, it really is. Having a plan is the best way to prepare. Like, saying that a breach is never going to happen, therefore I'm not going to prepare, is just, I think logically you just know then you're not going to have a plan if it does. And then, so if you make the plan and then, testing it, when you're testing that plan, that even reinforces it more to kind of, if you are going to be someone who could panic, like nothing seems better to prevent you from panicking than being able to take out a thing that says, here's what you do. And here's where you are, and here's where you go. And if you've practiced it too, even more, like, oh yeah, we've been around a table, we've talked through this, I know exactly what to do. Like, that seems logical to dispense of that.
All right, we have time for one more. And I think we'll go with the legal and regulatory pitfalls.
Yeah. Like what? You're afraid to get sued?
Yes. Compliance, something's not aligned, and in the threat of a lawsuit.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe that's just scary.
Well, it is scary because, I think we live in a really litigious society.
Yes.
You don't ever need a reason to sue somebody. You can just sue them, right? Which can become very distracting, and it's a whole bunch of papers and legal things and judges. And yeah, it can get really, I think, intimidating and scary. Try to pay attention to what you're doing. We cover, in terms of the vCISO stuff, we cover a lot of things in an MSA. master services agreement where there's indemnity clauses and things like that. So if we did make mistakes, there's some limit to responsibility in that. I mean, we are humans. We're going to make mistakes. I'm actually surprised that I haven't been sued more over the years, but I think the legal community with respect to information security and cybersecurity is way behind. Way behind. I mean,
What do you
when you
mean
think
by
about
that?
the laws are antiquated. The laws can't keep up. They don't prosecute. They don't investigate well. They don't prosecute well. Take HIPAA, for instance, HIPAA doesn't have any audits. They do investigations. They won't get involved until after there's a breach. And then the Office for Civil Rights, and it might be 4 or 5 years before they actually finish their investigation. So on the regulatory side of things, I think there's a lot of confusion and slowness, a lot of subjectivity. On the legal side, like the civil stuff, who's accountable? They continue to try to figure out where to pin the blame on things. And everybody knows where to pin the blame on things. It's the board. It's the CEO, but they don't do it. They don't hold them accountable. And I've had discussions with them about this, I mean, like lawyer people, and they admit that, because I'm like, why don't you hold people accountable? That's such a big problem in our industry. People aren't taking this serious because why? Why do I have to take it? I mean, it's like raising your damn kid. If you're not going to hold them accountable for their shitty choices, why would they change? And so, there's lots of stuff there on the, you can ask, questions of lawyers. Ask one here, another one over here, and another one over here, and you get 3 different answers. There's not a lot of good legal precedent. It's just, that's a really, really broken part of this whole industry. So yeah, you might get sued, and it might be scary. I have no idea.
I would say that just like everything else, like we just talked about, having a plan, so like you said, having a good service agreement that has protections in it, having cyber insurance, knowing how that works, and yeah, just assume you're going to get sued at some point. There's going to be a mistake, and make sure you have things in place and you know what to do when that time comes. I mean, we've had to reach out to our cyber insurance policy before, for things that mistakes that happened, and we got blamed for it, and it was eye-opening. We've only had to do it like once or twice, but it was interesting to. I probably would have done things differently after going through that experience, because there are some things that it wouldn't cover because I was trying to keep the client. I was trying to do what was right in my own mind. And sometimes your cyber insurance policy doesn't line up with what you think is right. I mean, they're not going to pay for you being a good person. They'll pay for them to sue you, and there'll be things that kick in because they sued you and you weren't doing it. But like they're not. All that to say, be prepared and have stuff in place to protect you.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think your
that's
number
the
one risk is
bottom line.
being found negligent. On the criminal side of things, I mean, that's usually pretty black and white, and it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So, I mean, if you're a criminal, expect that punishment. If you're on the civil side of things, that's the bar, right? I'm not a lawyer, so don't take any of this as legal advice, because they do get pissed off about that. They like to protect their kingdom, but it's negligence. So, am I negligent or not? I made a mistake. That's not negligence. Mistakes are not negligent. I mean, some can be. It's more like a lack of paying attention, making shitty choices, intentionally. Ignorance is definitely negligent. So if you're trying to do the right thing, document your purpose, your reason for doing those things. The more you're doing, that's why I love consulting the business to make the risk decisions and then implementing their risk decisions, because I'm out of the equation in terms of negligence, in that they made the choices, but and then document the stuff, because if you do get deposed, it's really not, it's kind of intimidating, but you'll be asked questions about why you did what you did, why you made these choices.
Mm-hmm.
And you might forget some of those. I forget a lot of them. So I try to go back to my documentation. But that also goes back to the governance thing. If you really nail down governance, roles, and responsibilities, it's crystal clear who's to blame.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up our session. Hopefully, listeners, by the time you are listening to this, Halloween will already have taken place. So I hope that you got lots of candy. And thank you. Thank
And
you
you're
for
not
listening.
scared anymore.
And hopefully you're not scared.
I'm not scared, except for when I look in the mirror. That's scary.
And your feet.
Oh my God.